Hi, everyone. Tom Vogel, Wrestling's finest PC pro wrestling game. I haven't done a video in a while, and I thought I would do one today. And what we're going to talk about, it's actually a two-parter. First part is kind of how I rate wrestlers. A lot of people have asked the process, so I'm going to walk you through it here. So what I have up on my screen here is Roddy Piper. Um, Rating wrestlers for wrestling's finest is very, very difficult, mainly because you have such detailed ratings, and also you really have to truly understand the game engine to know how everything kind of blends together. So I'm going to briefly talk on certain things when I go through this, but so let's get started here. So when I decide to rate somebody, of course, you have the name. What I start with is control, defense, stamina, pin, submission, and wisdom. Now, control, it's pretty basic. I would say 95% of the wrestlers in the game are either a 14 or a 15. There are some 16s, but not very many. It's kind of based on wrestlers like aggressive, passive style. Roddy's, I give him a 15. He's definitely not a 16, and I think he's a little bit more than a 14. The control rating comes into play several times during a match, like if a wrestler gets to the ropes during a pin. If you see down here, successful hold, auto control loss, fan interaction, if none of those occur when you're checking, like let's say a 99 comes up, since it doesn't fall anything, you start back over by going to original control. And what you do is you compare both wrestlers' control rating. If they're both equal, then one's in control 1 to 20 and the other's 21 to 40. Uh, Next thing, defense. I would say the average is either probably a 0 or maybe a -1. There are a few -3s, not very many. And that number, like Piper's a -1, so if his opponent had successful hold 0 to 72, it would actually become 0 Stamina, 73.5. Um, let's skip to the second rating. You either get a 4, 5, or 6. Fours are the best, and they're much better than a 5 or a 6. What the second stamina rating does is every time a wrestler hits his stamina level, like Piper here's a 73, his pin rating goes up and submission ratings go up by 5, the first two. Once the first two hit 40, then it carries over to the third number. Another big thing is specialty counters go down by this second stamina rating too. So if Piper's counter to say a power slam, his specialty counter say is a 20, each time he gets tired it gets reduced by 5. So the more tired Roddy gets, the easier it is for his opponent to put him in a or to apply a specialty move. And then if he does apply it, chances are of Roddy getting pinned greatly increase because we get to add extra pin numbers. Pin and submission, that's really tricky because I try to figure out what a wrestler's pin percentage should be starting the match. And then I also like to look, where would it be if he gets tired 4 times? So like for Roddy, 4 times through, you would add 4 times 5, 20 to the first two. So it would be, again, this is 4 times through his stamina, so it would be 45, 44, 3. So the 5 and 4 would carry to the third number. So you'd have 3 plus 9. So now Roddy's pin would be 40, 40, 12. So based on the wrestler's ability, that's how I kind of settle on the pin rating. I then figure out the successful hold, auto control loss, fan interaction. Successful holds, I'd say average is 70 or 71. Brawlers and lower type level guys are going to probably be in the 69 region. Some might even be as low as 68. Mid carders, of course, are lower than that, but the highest, I believe, I don't know if there's any more 75s. I think it's 74, and there are not very many of those. Auto control loss, it ranges from 75 to 85, all the way up to probably 75 to 89. I would say average is probably 87. Some, can be a little bit higher. The third number of 5, that's based on a rating of 1 to 5. The higher, the better. This rating indicates how Roddy can force his opponents to make mistakes. You actually net this with his opponent. So if his opponent's a 75, say 88, and a 3, what you would do is you would take Roddy's 5, the other guy's 3, difference of 2, and you would actually add that then to his opponent's auto control loss. So instead of being 75 to 88 for that match, it would be 75 to 90. It's big if auto control loss comes up. Say Roddy's in control and he turns a 80, which would be auto control loss. His opponent is now in control, and then you would go to this section of his card to decide or to determine what happens. Sometimes you might get in a little loop where you get auto control losses back and forth. That makes for a kind of a sluggish, sloppy match, and depending who your two wrestlers are, that can happen. And I actually think that helps make the matches more realistic. Fan interaction, face would have an asterisk after his number or numbers. Roddy's a heel. He has 95, which isn't terrible. I mean, that's the best you can have for a heel, meaning it won't come up a lot, and also meaning Roddy isn't affected a lot by the fans. Some guys are 95 to 97, even 98. I would say the average heel is 95 to 96. Faces probably are 95 to 96, but somebody like Hogan's actually a 95 to 98. And when it comes up for a face, they get a big jump. Cut rating, injury, it's based on 1 to 10. Usually heels are going to be lower than faces because they just don't, get attacked or injured. So Roddy's a 2, which is real good. Cuts, guys like Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Abdullah the Butcher, they're 10s. Piper's a 7. You probably could make an argument he could be an 8, but I don't think he was a huge bleeder. This rating indicates how often they will get cut. Tag team, it ignored for singles. It used to be needed, but now it's not, and we just haven't taken it off yet. Next thing is the control. First thing I do is I do the hammer and outside ring, and I actually work backwards. I start at outside ring, and most of your heels are going to either be a 93 to 99 or a 94. You may have somebody that's a 92 or a 91, like Abdullah the Butcher, the Sheik, maybe Bruiser Brody, but 93 is probably average, or between that and a 94. The outside ring range is what's indicated here, 29. That's out of 40. That means how often, if this outside ring comes up, will Roddy actually take the action outside? The 10 is based on 1 to 10. This means Roddy's going to do probably some wilder stuff outside the ring, maybe injuring his opponent more. You might just more kind of intense results. The 9 here, that's his illegal pin rating. It's from 1 to 10. Most of your heels are going to be 7, 8, or 9. There are not a lot of 10s, but like a Flair, Race, Bockwinkel, they will be 10. So Roddy's right there at a 9. That means how often they will attempt a illegal pin, and also it will add extra pin numbers the higher it is to the opponent's pin rating. DQ 84-92, that's 9 numbers. That's pretty high. I would say the average heel is probably 85 to 92. Average face outside rings probably 94 to 99, and his DQ's probably 88 to 93. Heels, of course, are more. This is Piper's range. The default setting, it uses the second one, so it's 21 out of 40. And then if that passes, then you check the chart and you would look under a DQ rating of 5. The higher the DQ rating is, the more likely a DQ will occur. You may, if Piper didn't care about being DQ'd and he really wanted to injure somebody, maybe in a bounty match, you would uncheck what we call the box, and the default would be taken off, so you'd actually use the 26 and 7. Then I go up to the hammering. Hammering's important because there's certain numbers you can't use because the hammering ties in to how often a wrestler gets to do a specialty move. Hammering for Roddy's 0 to 48. The 17 means from 0 to 17 it will fall under legal, and then 18 to 48 it will fall under illegal. So of course heels will have more numbers that are illegal. This is very important, the hammering all the way through outside ring. This is where you're trying to capture the first real capturing of a wrestler's style. So it's very important you know your wrestler, and you after you rate wrestlers or you look at other wrestlers, you kind of get a feel for what the average numbers are. Once I do this, then I give control ratings, and they're all based out of 40. This auto control is very important because if Roddy say Roddy does a kick and he's in control from 1 to 37, say there's no pin. If you turn a 1 to 18, then Roddy's in auto control, meaning you get to skip that successful hold, auto control loss, fan interaction step. You get to skip all that and you just go determine the type of hold Roddy's going to attempt to apply. The -1, that number is used to reduce his opponent's first number. So if Roddy was fighting somebody who was 18 -2, then Roddy's first number would drop to 16. And the other guys would drop to 17 because it would be 18 -1. Control is very, very important. If you control, then you cannot be pinned unless some really wild event happens. You always want to be in control as much as possible. The attempted pins, pretty much standard here. They're about average. Same for the stamina off. Some wrestlers, like the big power guys, will have more off for body slams. Flyers might have like 14, 15 off for ropes that do it a lot. Roddy only has 3 numbers, and he was never really known as a big flyer. Then you have counters. These are huge. I'm just going to show you talk about the first number first. These are all based out of 40. So if somebody attempts a body slam on Piper and Piper turns a 1 to 9, he counters it. I would say Roddy's, for the most part, are right around average. Now, what's very, very important is the letter rating. This is the adjustment that is made to his opponent's specialty moves. You cross-reference Piper's letter rating with his opponent's letter rating for putting the move on. So say his opponent has a power slam that has an A after it. Well, the highest you can be is an AA. There's a cross-reference chart that you use, and whatever number shows up, I think in this case it would be a 10. You would add 17 and 10, so Roddy's counter to since we're doing a body slam, Roddy's an A, they're an A. I think you add 8, so Roddy would be a 17 if a guy tried a power slam specialty move. Remember, though, every time Roddy gets tired, that drops by 5. And you'll see Roddy has 3 double A's, which is very, very good. It looks like he has 4 A's, which is really good. So Roddy would be more susceptible to pin holds. Headlock, you're really not going to have many finishers that way. So Roddy's in pretty good shape here. Then next thing is legal hammering. That's, like I said, for Roddy, it's 0 to 17, or it might be 18. I'm sorry, no, it's 17. Very, very important here. This is where you get a wrestler's individual style. The specialty moves, 36, that actually is determined based on what the hammering is. And I have a chart, like a cheat sheet. So if your hammering's a 48, then you would get a 36. If your hammering's 46 to 50, you'd get a 36. The more hammering numbers you have, like if you have somebody who's like a 50, they're going to have more, even though it's 36-40, they're going to have more specialty chances than Roddy is, because Roddy has 48 where the other guy would have 50. But, very important. I get those to tie in. But this is where you see, like, if you were doing Flair or Wahoo McDaniel, you'd see a ton of chops. Somebody like Ole Anderson's arm holds would probably be like 1-11. Somebody like Great Kabuki, he'd have nerve holds, like a Kamala would have high nerve holds. Some like Dory Funk Jr. will have a lot of forearms. It's very, very important you know your wrestler so you can fill this in to capture the style. Then what I do is you do the stamina off for each one. And, they don't vary too much. They're only from like -3 for an arm hold all the way up maybe to a -6. Most are a 4 or a 5. Same for all the other holds. Your elbows drops, knee smash, leg drops, they're typically might be a little higher. Roddy's probably just slightly above average. Control, again, very, very important. Roddy wants to stay in control. So every time he has one of these moves that's successful, he's in control. I guess everyone's a 36. So 36 out of 40, which would be 90% of the time, he will stay in control. That's why, these holds are very important. Counters, Roddy's not real good at the first 2 counters. And I would say overall, he's probably average. A lot of it isn't as important as you'd think, because let's say Roddy's fighting somebody who doesn't have any speed moves. Well, his 10 won't even come into play because his opponent will never even try a speed move. So, yeah, 10 is good, but it also depends who he's going to wrestle. Same with a headbutt. It's 14, which is pretty high, but if his opponent doesn't have a headbutt, it's a moot point. Last column is which numbers, when they come up, does Roddy get an attempt to pin? Always want to make sure the number's the last number of the series. That's why you'll see forearm 28-30. You go with a 30. Chops 24-27. You go with a 27. That leads to illegal holds. Again, you capture the style. And if you look at Roddy, he's big on that double. He'd use his 2 fingers to do those eye pokes. He probably has more eye gouges than anybody. Most guys probably would have more face rakes. If you look at Roddy, he doesn't really do as many chokes as most heels. His turnbuckle, throat chops are not very, are probably on the lower end. Low blow is about right. The reason is Roddy punched like crazy. And so you want to capture that. A lot of your heels might be like 24-35 because they're going to have more chokes and turnbuckles. But Roddy's 19-35, and he's -6. His control is 36, and he gets trying to pin at 34-35. His counters, so-so. A couple of them are higher than most heels. His control is outstanding, 36, whole bunch of 37s. 35, not as high, but he only does 1 bite move. So one of the things is when you trade holds, the game will recommend what holds to trade to. I usually do my own. I let the computer tell me what I should trade out of, but then I'll pick. And a lot of times I'll pick higher stamina off and higher controls, but I also will look at the opponent's counters. Like I probably wouldn't use a turnbuckle even though the stamina's off because it's 36, which is high, but I'm assuming most of your counters are going to be a 4 or a 5. So if I'm Roddy, I'd probably go with a punch. And you try to also make it realistic. I'm not going to choose a lot of holds that Roddy doesn't do a lot. And then finally, specialty holds. The rule is to rate a guy, he has to have a minimum of 3 specialty holds. And I don't allow if you have like a specific foreign object. Let's say you have a loaded mask and then you have a neck breaker and then you have a foreign object. Won't rate him. He has to have at least 2 non-foreign object ones. Roddy's easy. He has a knee lift, neck breaker, pile driver, sleeper, and foreign object. Roddy's probably the best at the foreign object. He has 11 numbers, which is very high. On a rating of 1 to 10, he's a 10, which is going to really help him. And these numbers here are added to his opponent's pin rating. He's in control 39 out of 40, and he gets to try a pin from 2 to 40. Stamina comes off the foreign object chart, so that's why there's nothing there. If you go up here, you'll notice the knee lift. He does 12 of those. Not real strong finisher, as is the pile driver, but he only does 11 of those. Submission moves are tricky because even though they're high, keep in mind the opponent's third submission rating is 0, and it's going to stay 0 until he gets pretty tired. Roddy does have a pretty good sleeper. The other thing to look at, very important, is the hammering. HM is for hammering, PD is pile driver, SB is submission. So remember how Roddy, we looked here, his counter 17 double A. So if he was facing somebody that had a knee lift as a hammering A, Roddy's counter is a double A. So he's probably going to add, I don't know if it's 10 or 12 numbers to his hammering, so he'd actually become 27. So it's Roddy's an A, double A, and double A. Those are very, very good. Very strong, and then you factor that 10 in. Roddy's number one move's the neck breaker, 12 to 57, which is like 46 numbers. Not only is it a double A, he is in control 37 out of 40. He gets to attempt the pin from 5 to 40. Sometimes a guy would land in the rope, so he couldn't. Takes 12 off, which isn't great, but it's okay. But look at the extra pin numbers. He gets to add 16 to his opponent's first pin rating and 14 to his second. And if he can get the guy tired when he does it, say he lands it when the guy's in his second or third stamina level, the pin rating can go up very, very fast. And the next thing you know, the first two are 40 out of 40, and then the third one, can be, 15, 20, whatever it may be, based on his stamina level. So, like I said, very, very important you get the right specialty moves. And you don't want to make every one great. Because, I saw Roddy do knee lifts a lot. He would go for pins, and I saw him pin some lower level wrestlers with him, but normally he wouldn't get the pin, and that's why these numbers are low. They could possibly even be a number or two lower, but they don't come up that often. There's two strategy cards that, if you use strategy card, one is you go to the section and the game will turn two cards for you and it will determine what moves being applied. There's also a specific specialty where you get to pick the hold you want to try. If the computer's controlling the wrestler and it says specific, it has a pretty complicated formula. It takes into account the number of extra pin numbers and how often you apply it. So if the computer was calling for this specific specialty, it would call neck breaker. I probably would too. The only exception would be is if you're fighting somebody that has a really, like his counter's like 20 double A and he's not tired, because that would put his counter, up in the 30s. But you kind of just have to know your opponent. But again, very important you nail down the specialty moves, and that takes a lot of research and film watching, and then you also have to try to determine how often they use it. Roddy didn't use the pile driver a lot. He did use it, but his two main holds were the neck breaker and sleeper, and then he would go to the foreign object. And 27-26 and then 1, that adds to the opponent's pin rating. I mean, that can just go through the roof. So that handles the specialty. Let me just go back here. Just a couple points of emphasis. Again, the hammering through outside ring. I'm not saying the control and attempted pin and stamina is important. It is, but this is kind of the fallout from what you put in here. So if I put, I want to get Roddy's kicks. He did a lot of stomps, so it's 51 to 58. It's important I get this right. Then I can say, okay, Roddy didn't go for many pins, so he's only going to try to pin the guy in a 38, 39, 40, but he's going to stay in control from 1 to 37, which I think is 92.5% of the time, and the stamina off is 6, which is pretty good. Most opponents' counters are either going to be a 7, 8, or 9. So there's a chance it will be countered, but also a chance, a better chance it's going to land. So you really want to get all these nailed down. Then go ahead and fill these in. And a lot of times, a wrestler that doesn't use like the ropes a lot, you're probably like 34. Most guys are probably a 35 or 36. Roddy's not going to pin you very often. It's only 13 to 40, and his stamina is only 12. A flyer might have like 7 or 8 numbers, will be like 1 to 37. His pin will be 5 to 40, and stamina off might be like 15 or 16. Very important you nail this down. Very important you nail down the legal hammering, because this gets the wrestler's style. Some guys, I mean, you can go through all the wrestlers in the game and you'll say, oh, he really likes, somebody might have an elbow like 30 to 34. Somebody might have chops 24 to 32. You might have big power, wrestlers might have power moves are like 21 to 30. But this is where we capture it. Guys that like the figure 4 for a finisher will have a lot of leg holds. I probably could give Roddy one more neck hold because he does like using the neck breaker, so he will try to work on a guy's, neck. So what I could possibly do with Roddy is take one away from the leg and give it to the neck, or take one away from the whip and give it to the neck. So very, very important. Same with the illegal. You want to nail this down. That's why Roddy has 4 eye gouge numbers, where most guys only have 1 or 2. And Roddy has 17 punches, which is very, very high, because that's what Roddy did. Just because a guy did something a lot doesn't mean you say, well, I'm going to make it -8, make his control 38, because that wouldn't be realistic. Even though he used them a lot, -6 is still very good, and 36 for control is very good. So, but the important thing is nail these down. And when you now that I've done this video, if you go back and you can go look at wrestlers and really try to capture their style. Again, it's more important to look at what numbers, hold numbers they have than all this. Because you might say, oh, this guy has like under legal holds, like Flair has chops 21 to 29, and then you will see it's going to be -7 or 8. The control is going to be 37. You say, wow, he's really effective at those. And in most cases, that's what you will see. Kabuki might have nerve holds like 10 to 16. It will be -6, control 36 or 37. That will capture the style of the great Kabuki. So it's kind of fun to go through and look at the wrestlers, and maybe now you can get a better kind of grip on how they all are, now that I showed you this. Again, it takes a lot of time, a lot of study, and, we're not going to rate wrestlers if we don't have the information. I've always wanted to rate a wrestler called the Mummy. He, had dressed up like a mummy. I just can't find enough stuff on him. So, can't rate them, and we're not going to guess, and we're not going to rate somebody just to rate them. And we're very prideful of our ratings, and we always will be. So I hope this was somewhat informative. You can always fire questions if you go to, I don't know how to put links up. I'll try to figure it out. But if you're interested, just go to Google or your search engine and type Delphi, DELPHI, forum, and then Wrestling's Finest, and it will take you to our Wrestling's Finest page where people post their results. We talk wrestling. Great guy. So if you want to check it out, you can post questions there if you have any. But just pretty good. We think it's a pretty good page, or a pretty good site to, get to know each other and talk wrestling. But I appreciate you joining me on this, and I hope it was somewhat informative, and hope everybody's staying safe in these weird times we're having now. And again, have a great evening, and thank you for joining me. Tom Vogel, Wrestling's Finest, saying so long.